Okay, today is March 27th, 2024. We're at the library. Today I'm going to try to set the record straight about rumors and information that people are wondering about that I just want to make sure that people know the truth. So I'm going to talk about a couple of subjects. Number one, I'm going to talk about the idea about the Zane Grey, that Mrs. Wrigley put the chimes tower up there just to bug Zane Grey. I'm going to talk about the Holly Hill house, that people believe that Peter Gannot hated women, and so that's what I'm going to try to clear that one too. I'm going to explain about the tunnel, that when you get off the boat, there's that tunnel on your left side up across the hill. So people have all kinds of misconceptions about where the tunnel came from. And then I'm also going to talk about the deaths that happened while they were building the casino. They have some pretty weird ideas, especially one that had nothing to do with fact. So anyway, I'm going to start off with Zane Grey. Now, the concept that people have come up with over the years, that Mrs. Wrigley, Ada Foote Wrigley, hated Zane Grey. And that's the reason she put the chimes up, in order to bug him, because it rings every 15 minutes from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. Okay, so let's debunk that one. Start from the beginning. They started building the chimes in 1925. Zane Grey built his home there in 26. So he already knew about the chimes being there before he built his home. Okay, you can debunk that one. Or that based on a timeline, that doesn't work. Also, the reason that Mrs. Wrigley hated Zane Grey is because he was the drinking partner of William Wrigley Jr. and would get him drunk all the time. Okay, I'm not saying that William Wrigley Jr. didn't drink anything. I'm sure he did. But it was his son, Philip Knight Wrigley, was the one that would get drunk all the time. So it was not William Wrigley Jr., it was the son. Also, you have another trouble with the timeline. Mr. Wrigley owned the Chicago Cubs. So from 1921 to 1951, they had their spring training up at what they now call the Field of Dreams, well, that whole area where the city hall, everything is. Now, he would only come primarily to the island during spring training, which was in February and March of every year. He had a home over on Orange Grove Boulevard in Pasadena. That's where he spent most of his time, and in Chicago, where the Wrigley Gum Company was, and the big Wrigley Field. Zane Grey primarily came here to go fishing, so he normally came during the summer months. So rarely were they ever together. So the idea of them hanging out together, again, doesn't work. Now, I don't know this as a fact, but it does make sense. Mrs. Wrigley really loved music. And they used to, at the city park at the end of Crescent, where they have all those benches and everything, they used to do concerts there during the summer. As people started, this went back to about 1906. So you see those benches, that's where people would sit. And then on lower terrace, you'll see kind of a turnaround area. That's where the bandstand was. Well, when people started having their homes up on the hillside, I don't know why, but they were complaining about the noise of that beautiful music that they were playing down in the amphitheater. So my feeling was that Mrs. Wrigley put up the chimes tower because not only does it play, that tells you what time it is, Janny Eisenhut now plays beautiful music, like she'll be playing for Easter, which she did yesterday, and Easter Sunday for the sunrise service. Also in those days, people coming to the island after getting married or being on their honeymoon on the mainland, when they knew that they were coming over on the giant steamships, the SS Catalina, the SS Avalon, when they found out that they were coming back after their honeymoon, they would play Here Comes the Bride up in the Chimes Tower to let everybody in town know, go down and greet the honeymoon couple. They're back in Avalon. So there are so many reasons why it's a positive. Also, I talked to Rommel, I think that was how you pronounce his name. He was the son of St. Gray. And I asked him specifically, did this Chimes Tower bug your father? And he said no. So I think we can pretty well defunct that one. Okay, that's one off my list. Now comes the Holly Hill House. Okay. Now, they did have a sign up in the early days. By the way, the Holly Hill House is the third oldest house on the island. The oldest is up on Viewdaloo, that one as you go up around the corner, kind of a pinkish house. The second oldest is next to the museum. It was destroyed years ago. That is the third one. It was built in 1890 for a man by the name of Peter Gannot. Now, I will say that he did have a sign up there that said women not allowed. Okay? He did have the sign there. So people begin to believe that he came over here with his fiance, girlfriend, whatever, wanting to establish his home here with her, that she took one look at Avalon. Of course, in those days, there was very little here. The Bannings had just taken over relatively early about that time. So there was very little here. So they said that she just said, forget it, turned around and jilted him, left him. So from that moment on, he hated women. Okay, here we're going to debunk that story. To begin with, in the 1970s, I did something for the museum that I'm so glad I did. I interviewed almost 40 people. All we had were tape recorders in those days, wanting to get all the stories that I could from all the old timers. I mean, people who came over the island back in the 1890s, the turn of the century. So I was able to interview them, get them on tape. So that's the reason I know a bit about the old times, because of the fact that I was talking to people who lived it, and we have it on tape. Now, I'll mention her name. Her family doesn't live here anymore. Her name was Jessie McClanahan. Okay, and I asked her, could you tell me about whether or not Peter Gannot hated women? He said, well, let's put it this way. I spent a lot of time with him up there, and he would sneak me in the back door so nobody could see me coming into his home. So I started trying to figure out, why would he do this? Now, back in 1890, he really came here in 1888. He was a bachelor. There were very few people here on the island. He had established himself in Pasadena in the water commission, or whatever his involvement was. So he was an eligible bachelor beyond belief. So I am sure that he was going to start being bugged by mothers wanting him to date their daughters, and the mothers who wanted to date him themselves. So putting myself in his place as being a confirmed bachelor myself, I would want to be selective on who would and who would not come into my home or even solicit me for wanting me to date them. So I have a feeling that this was his way of telling people, don't bug me. The sign did say no women allowed, but based on what Jesse told me, he did sneak women in the back door. So he was not a woman hater. I have no idea about the legend, but I'm sure that his girlfriend would not have come all the way over and then turned her back on him and said, you know, I don't want to live in Avalon. So anyway, so that debunks number 2.